Hello, everyone. Excited to be here with you today. This is a topic I love to talk about. I, she found me because of CADCA. I presented on this at CADCA National Leadership Forum. And I have found this topic that we're going to dive into today is one that a lot of us as adults have assumed there must be some connection here between social media, youth substance use, and mental health. But I'm going to deliver the research to you that proves that there is absolutely a connection. And so, real quick backdrop, who's this lady coming on Zoom talking to you? Rikki Barton. I have, as you said, been in the field of primary substance use prevention for the past 16 plus years, going on 17, and this is my heartbeat. I love doing primary prevention with communities. So a lot of that work was done boots on the ground in both South Central Louisiana as well as Southwest Missouri, where I oversaw prevention work in 21 counties, but then started this consulting gig about 5 years ago. And it's been a really fun process of building presentations and doing research and training all across the country with communities like yours. And so I'm coming to you. My base is out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I'm just going to be straight with you. It doesn't really look like that right now, although it's very beautiful. They're beautifying a lot. If those of you who are football fans, the NFL draft is coming up next month and hosted here in Pittsburgh. So if you're going to be watching that, beautiful views of the city to be expected. Or if you're watching the pit, for sure, you're going to see a beautiful, cityscapes there. But I actually kind of wish that I was in Virginia this weekend because I would come and do the polar plunge with you all. I would do it. So if I could be there, I would be. But this next picture is really why I do what I do. This is a room full of, about 300 or 400 young people in New Jersey, where I actually were talking to them about this exact topic. So not only do I love to speak to adults about this topic so that we can be better examples and models and guiders through this journey of online space, but I also love to talk to young people and empower them to have a voice about what's going on in the world around them and being immersed in that online space. So this is meant to sort of just anchor us in the importance of the lives that this presentation is focused on. That young people today, without a shadow of a doubt, are in a different world than many of us were raised in. I'm in the part of the generation, I'm an elder millennial, so I was getting on Facebook back when it was limited to just if you had a collegiate email address, at psu.edu. I went to Penn State. And so that's me. I lived most of my life without social media until my formative years at Penn State of collegiate years, but certainly well past and into my brain being fully developed. So I don't pretend to know what it's like to be a young person growing up inundated with social media, but I work with youth all the time. And I know that they are worried about themselves. They're worried about their peers. They see the impact that it has on them. And when I talk with them, they very much want to do something about it. So today, our journey of conversation is going to be this. I am going to talk to you about the facts of each of these like three topics, and then look at where they intersect and where research is showing some very, as I call it, a risky intersection. We're at higher risk at that overlap. And then how do we as adults make a difference? How do we make an impact there? And we'll get into all of that. But I always start my presentations here. Social media is not all bad. And I think that for those of us who did not grow up in social media, it is very easy for us to be very judgy about social media. Well, I didn't have it when I was a kid, and I got bullied on the playground, but when I left, I was able to go home. The internet didn't follow me. And we act like we were better then. And so I think that it's really important to note that likely my guess would be a large percentage of us are on social media of some sort, and that we utilize that every day. And so to that point, if it was so bad, would we really be on it ourselves? And so we have to take a moment to respect the fact that there are great aspects to it. We are more connected than any other generation that has ever lived because of the internet. And as an example of this, about this time last year, actually, had just gotten home from a trip to Tanzania and Uganda. And in Tanzania, I summited Mount Kilimanjaro. And then when I came down, we got to the Wi-Fi spot of the next, hut area where we tented and we slept. And I was able to get on Instagram and send my family a message that I was alive. I did it right, Janet. I was like, guess what? I'm here and I did it. They got that message from the plains of Africa. So I'm just saying, like, we are able to be so connected. Many of you likely have loved ones around the country, around the world that you're able to connect to because of the internet and because of social media. It also makes us laugh. I included this meme because we've all been there. But, I think the sixth love language, that book needs to be rewritten because I think it's sending memes and reels back and forth to one another because that's pretty much what all my people do. We make each other laugh with those. Certainly being introduced to new ideas, new perspectives, whether we want them or not, we are introduced to new ideas and new perspectives. And it also provides support. I joke that I was a victim to the pandemic sourdough craze, and I continue to be a victim to the sourdough craze. And I follow different influencers, different sourdough bread influencers to learn what they're doing and recipes that they have. So I have support for my hobbies. You likely have hobbies that you are part of groups and that you follow certain accounts because of that. But it also provides support to individuals who may be struggling. And to connect to that, recent research, and this last point here, shows us that especially youth who are marginalized or experiencing mental distress, social media can be a good factor for them. Now, there are risks, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but it actually can be helpful because of the support that's there. So it's not all bad. And as long as we can all start there with that understanding, we're now going to launch into the consequences that do exist because we need to be aware of them. Before I get into the specific facts and statistics around each of our three topics today, I want to just cover some general biological, physiological reactions that we're having to both screens as well as social media. So, research is showing that, first of all, we are giving a lot of strain to our eyes and to our body. Really, if we go with 2008 as the date when the first iPhone came out, you could say, so that was what? Wait, that's math. 18 years ago. So, up until about 18 years ago in the history of mankind, we were not having a glowing screen device in front of our eyeballs about 6 inches away. So, until 18 years ago, we weren't struggling with that. We didn't have our eyes didn't have to adjust to that. So our eyes are figuring out what that's like to have this glowing thing right in front of us, including that is the body's strain. I don't know anybody that texts with like perfect chiropractor approved posture, where you're texting with your neck aligned and your spine aligned. I don't know anybody that does that. Right, Janet's already adjusting. Janet's already in perfect posture because when we call it out, we're more aware of it. But most of us text with our heads down, our necks craned, our shoulders slouched. So we're really straining our bodies. And connected to this is certainly also straining our sleep. And I've got research later from a 2018 British study that found that we're getting a lot of delayed sleep and disrupted sleep. And that could be because number one, we lay in bed by a show of hands. How many people have stayed awake longer than we should have because we were scrolling social media? So we're all kind of guilty of that. So you're staying up later than we should. Connected to that strain to the eyes, that the light in our eyes actually activates part of our brains that keeps us awake longer. So even once you put your phone down, it's likely that you're going to take a little bit longer to fall asleep than you would have. But also, for the majority of people now, our phones are our alarm clocks. So they are next to our bed. And so if we wake up in the middle of the night to get a quick sip of water on our nightstand or to use the restroom really quick, we oftentimes check our phone to see what time it is, but that might result in us seeing notifications. Oh, so and so texted me after I fell asleep. Or look, Facebook's telling me that someone liked something. And all of a sudden we go to that and we're scrolling again and activating those parts of our brains so we're awake longer than we should be. They're finding that especially with young people, there's an increased risk of obesity and type 2 diabetes. They're studying the brain and what screen usage, the impact it's having on the brain. They're seeing that there could be the start to some cognitive processes being delayed because that part of the brain is being affected by the screen time. And then delays in learning. And this is not taking into account brain rot. And I also do generational research. And let me just tell you all, Gen Alpha, they're the most incredible humans on the face of the planet because this generation came up with their own language that none of us understand, and they're thriving. So I'm a huge advocate for Gen Alphas. I think they're incredible. Of course, I've got 5 nephews who are in Gen Alpha. So I'm a big fan of that age. But that aside, they're finding that Language development, especially, is lagging. Could be because of short-term language that you're using. Instead of saying right now, you might say RN. Could be because of misspelling that's going on. Lots of things could be contributing to that, but that they're seeing this delay in learning. Speaking of delays in learning, the irony is not lost on me that the next picture I'm going to show you I got off of Facebook. But what happened was a teacher put a piece of flip chart paper in front of her classroom for one class period, like one 50-minute class period. And she said, all right, students, turn on your notifications. I want to hear every beep and blip and ding, and come up and put a tally mark for the right location of where that notification came from. So in one class period, this, my friends, was what came about. So top left, you're looking at Facebook. Middle, upper is Snapchat. Upper right is email. All of this, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but all of this is text messages. So no surprise there. We've got a lot of text messages. In the middle, dead center is phone calls. And my question to you is, who's calling them? And the answer is probably you. It's probably parents and guardians, but I digress. Instagram, right here. Bottom left is Twitter, now known as X. Bottom middle is GroupMe or Discord, which is like communication apps. And then bottom right is other, which is likely gaming things, stuff like that. So this is kind of shocking to look at, that in one 50-minute class period, this is how many distractions came into the room with 30 students. But this is where I'd also pause and have us just think about how often we as adults might face this as well. So I challenge you, next time you're sitting at your desk for an hour, grab a piece of scrap paper and just turn on your phone and see how many notifications come in. Now, it won't look like this because there's not 30 of you, but it would still be really eye-opening to see how much comes into your device in a given period of time. I actually noticed I was actually scrolling through my own phone the other day with screen time adjustments and things like that, and I noticed my iPhone anyway, I don't know about Android, but my iPhone is actually telling me how many notifications came into my phone the day before. And yesterday alone was 259. So 259 notifications came into my device yesterday. And I will tell you that's probably low because we'll get into this in a little bit, but I actually decided to kind of test myself and break myself of some social media addiction. And I limited myself to 15 minutes on Facebook and Instagram. Those are really the only two social media that I have, for 15 minutes a day. I'm just be real with y'all. Before that, it was like 1.5 to 2 hours a day. So I guarantee you, if I was more active on those apps, I would be getting a whole lot more notifications. So I say this that like we're so distracted, but here's what's going on. The people behind the phones, the people behind these apps, they understand the psychology and the functioning of the human brain. So they understand addictive behavior and they have tapped into that with these devices. This image here is developed by the National Institute on Drug Abuse to help us understand what it's like to have a dopamine release in our system. So the image on the left has some orange bubbles, and those are to represent dopamine, one of our like happy feel good chemicals in our brain, and those are dopamine receptors. And this is what they like visualize for eating food. So like it's lunchtime. I ate right before I came on here. So I'm like feeling good. I got dopamine. You know what's happening there? Your body's like, "Hey, that food thing was kind of good for us. We should do that again." That's why you're rewarded with dopamine. So that's when you are hanging out with friends, when you're eating food, you're listening to music, intimacy, like all of those things are meant to drive us to do things that are good for us again. But the issue with that process is when we introduce a substance like the image on the right, all of those orange bubbles are again a flooding of dopamine with the introduction of cocaine to the brain in this particular image. And so what that dopamine does is it creates that rush, that high, and that's what the body begins to crave. And so I won't get into the down to the nitty gritty of brain science and the development of dependency and addiction. But my point here is that that same exact process happens when we're getting notifications on our phones and our devices. It creates a dopamine rush that, oh, I got a text. Somebody wants to communicate with me. Someone wants to connect, or maybe someone liked my post or someone commented. it creates this desire to go to the device. And they understand that. That's why they're sending you push notifications all the time because it drives you to that. I'm on Duolingo. I've been doing Duolingo. I'm on my streaks a little over 2 years at this point. It's because their notifications are so aggressive. You can like shame one another, your friends on Duolingo, to go and do your lesson. Like it's kind of cracks me up. They know how this works. So, my point being, all of us are likely addicted to our devices in some way, shape, or form. But then I point back to our young people whose brains aren't fully developed until age 25-ish. And so they're far more likely to develop this reliance and addictive like behavior going back to their devices for this dopamine rush because their brains, their neural pathways are still being strengthened and pruned in a really important time period of adolescence. And so it puts them at higher risk. The other thing that I'll say about this is, I'm sorry, just one second. The you can admit it or not. I'm going to guess that you've done this as well because I do it all the time. If you're sitting around your phone and it hasn't gone off for a while, there is no notification, you might be tempted to tap it just to see if it's there because your body's actually craving, your brain's craving dopamine. That's why you have that like reach to tap or to look or to see. And then if there is no notification there, what often happens, watch your behavior, you likely will still unlock or open your phone and start scrolling one of your preferred apps because your body's actually looking for that dopamine release. Like it's actually looking to find that because it wasn't rewarded. So all of this to say, in the chat or even in the room, if you want to, just add some things. So I've talked about some pros, some things that social media benefits us, ways that we can connect with people, we can find hobbies, all of this, but also some of the negative impacts. So just to sort of generate some thoughts here to bring this home to us personally, drop in the chat or come off mute. What are some things that you see impacting your life with social media? Good, bad, whatever you feel. And just to check with Megan while we're waiting, I do have until 1:30. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, you do have until.
Fantastic. I
So
didn't want to.
in the room, we've got somebody who does not have social media.
I love that for you. Truly, I mean that. I love that for you. That's not sarcasm. I wish I could. I wish I could. Yeah, Becky says to keep up with family. Most notifications turned off on most apps. Honestly, it's the smartest thing, and that's where we're going to get to today is having boundaries for yourself and teaching youth boundaries for themselves. Yep.
Probably the
They're
algorithm.
always available. Sorry, Megan, go ahead.
Somebody else, the algorithm.
I would say the algorithms and how they come at you with what you're searching for regularly. Because I can tell you right now, the little farm animals, and I'm now getting a donkey in my 5-year plan. Watching the donkeys and the goats and the
Yep.
ducks.
We're going to get into that because you're exactly right. The algorithm finds you and it will send you things you didn't know you needed or wanted. I've bought way more things than I ever should have because of the algorithm. Yep. I love that. A donkey. Distracting, hard to get back on track. Absolutely. Our brains aren't meant to multitask and they're not meant to ping between tasks. It's just not great for us. Comparison to others. I love that Brittany said that because we're going to talk about that too. Wasting time. Yep.
I
Thanks,
think
everybody. Well,
on
go ahead.
on a positive though, it's a way to keep up with events like that
Yeah.
are going on. I mean, it's a way I know through Paco. That's how we market a lot is through
Yeah.
Facebook and social media. So it's kind of cheaper, easier, but it's also a way. Anytime I go somewhere, I try to search that area on Facebook to see what's going on.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. I do the same thing. I was trying to find something, in Pittsburgh this weekend and I hopped on my 15 minutes to spend searching for events. 100%. Absolutely. Good. Okay, well, we'll hold all of those as an understanding that there are pros and cons because what we're about to launch into is, like I said, facts first. We're going to talk about the facts of each of these three things. The bubbles are going to walk with us through you'll see them in the top right corner just to help anchor where we're at. I won't spend too much time on the data of drug use and mental health because number one, the stats are out there. You can find them very easily. And I'm assuming that many of you are aware you're in part of this group because of your awareness of these kind of stats. And then we'll do some social media and then we'll get to the intersection. So mental health wise first, the sobering statistics here are that, and this is brand new data that was just released by the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, that one in six 12 to 17-year-olds will experience a major depressive disorder this year. 1 in 5 US high school students seriously considered suicide in the past year. That number made me pause. This got worse, y'all. This got worse since the last data was gathered. 1 in 5 high school students in the United States seriously considered suicide. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for 10 to 34-year-olds. And then, as we likely know, that depression, anxiety, behavioral health disorders in general, leading causes of illness and disability in our world. And that's in a variety of different ways. So we have to hold space for the fact that we do have mental health issues going on in our communities. It's real, it's prevalent, and then we're going to connect in a little bit how that touches on social media. But first, we'll move to substances. So when it comes to young people specifically, alcohol, cannabis, and nicotine are the top 3 substances used, regardless of method. Certainly, prescription medication may fall in there as well. But this is data, again, from that new release of the National Survey on Drug Use and Health of 12 to 20-year-olds, since those substances are illegal for those under the age of 21. 1 in 10 used marijuana in the last month. 1 in 9 used a vaping device or tobacco. You can see all of these, but 1 in 8 used alcohol. So not great statistics. Again, my work is this field, so I know that there's been ebb and flow, especially since the pandemic. Can't get into all of that today, but either way, substance use certainly still needs to be addressed in communities across the United States. So having touched on those two, let's get into some general statistics around social media, because I think that's probably the stats you're least familiar with. About half the world's population has a social media account of some type. But what I want to draw your attention to on this slide is that 95% of teenagers and 40% of 8 to 12-year-olds have some form of social media. Now, if you know this, tell me, what is the current legal age in the United States to have a social media account? Who knows that number? What's the current legal age to have a social media account? 13. Celeste, you get gold stars. All of the gold stars go to Celeste. It is 13. Oh, sorry, Megan, go ahead.
Oh, I just unmuted. The guesses in the room are like 16 and 18. So
I wish, and that's a Rikki opinion. I wish. It's 13. But my point still remains. Why, if the legal age is 13, are 40%, almost half of our 8 to 12-year-olds illegally have a social media account? Okay, so I'm going to let that hang for a little bit. We'll come back to that stat in just a second. This is from my friends over on Long Island. They had a youth survey, and they talked about time that they spend outside of school. And I was encouraged by this, actually. 93% of those students said that their number 1 thing they do outside of school hours is homework and studying. And number 2, spending time with their parents and their family. So I love that. But then number 3 is social media. And again, not that that's bad. We know that there are social connections happening in those spaces, that today's day and age, it's very common for people to meet each other across the United States and build friendships. We know that. But this is just something that helps us to anchor how much time young people are spending there. I'm going to put us adults on blast first in terms of our use online. Someone extrapolated the math and found that we as adults will be staring at screens for 44 years of our lives. So that's wild. We're on our smartphone devices themselves about 4 to 6 hours. And depending on who you are, it may be less and it also may be more. Like sometimes, what is it, like 9 a.m. on Sundays is when iPhone sends out those notifications of your screen time. And sometimes it's like you were on your phone for about 8 hours every day this week. And I'm like, oh. And then like when I travel and I'm at conferences, it's more like 4. Like it's much lower because I'm just not sitting at my desk with it there. So there's that. Then we're on social media apps about 2 to 2.5. More recent numbers are showing it's closer to 2.5 hours a day. Again, depends on you and your usage, but this is average. Teen-wise, they're spending about 3 to 3.5 hours a day watching videos, TikTok, YouTube. They're spending about 1 hour and 45 playing games, and they're spending about 3.5 hours on social media. I put an asterisk here on this stat because I want you to hold that stat in your mind, that on average, most US teens are spending about 3.5 hours a day on social media. We're going to come back to that. In case you were curious, this is how you find your screen time. I know this is being recorded, so you all can come back and take a look at this, but it's helpful for you to know. It's helpful for you to know how much time you're spending. And that could even be a conversation you have with the young people in your lives, whether you're a parent or a grandparent or a friend or a mentor. Sometimes in prevention, awareness is the first step in the game, is to raise awareness about behavior, to raise awareness about things so that we can then make an educated decision. So if your screen time is higher than you would like it to be, then it's time to maybe make some adjustments and you can track that. So this is how you can take a look at that. Across the US, most young people are on YouTube, TikTok, and Spotify in terms of apps. The way this survey, it was not specific to social media, it was just apps. So when I have presented this to young people, I actually usually put a Mentimeter up first and I ask them, which social media apps they're on. And Spotify gets knocked out and Snapchat moves in there. So YouTube, TikTok, Snapchat, if we're talking just social media. And about the amount of time spent on the apps. TikTok gets number one, YouTube number two, and Roblox number three, which is a gaming app, but also has a social component to it. So this is that 3 to 3.5 hours of videos. You can see how that makes sense because the top two apps are really solely video-based content that they're consuming. Okay, so we've gone over the facts of each of these. Now we're going to start to look at this overlap of like where we see the intersection happening, where we see the danger show up for our young people. So again, the bubbles are following us. We're going to start with drug use and mental health. This really happens in two ways. The first way is that individuals who are struggling with a mental illness often use substances to cope. They're using it to either numb what they are feeling, or potentially they have social anxiety, so they consume alcohol in order to feel like they can go out and be social. So this is the one direction that we see that happen. The other direction is that substance use actually can be the precipitator. It can be the instigator of mental health challenges and symptoms. So it can lead to things like depression, anxiety, and there's lots of research and longitudinal studies that show that, for example, heavy and consistent cannabis use in adolescents is directly connected to increased risk of schizophrenia in their 20s. So we see this direct connection between mental health issues and basically it stems from the substance use that's happening. So we've got these two directions that looks at. To help support this, I pulled some data from Missouri, Pennsylvania, and then nationally. Missouri student survey, I looked at the number of students who reported seriously considering suicide and found out that those who were seriously considering suicide were 3.2 times more likely to use alcohol, 3.4 times more likely to use marijuana, and 12 times more likely to misuse prescription drugs than their peers who were not seriously considering suicide. So this directly supports the notion that the intersection between drug use and mental health is happening here. Connected to that, Pennsylvania's survey, I looked at not suicide, but rather the students who report high depressive symptoms, and they were 3.8 times more likely to use alcohol, 8 times more likely to use marijuana, and almost 12 times more likely to use cigarettes than their peers who were not having highly depressive symptoms. So again, connection proven here with this data that those who are having either suicidal thoughts or depressive symptoms are more likely to be using substances than their peers. Then finally, in the US, we looked at the students who have major depressive episodes in the past year, and you can read the stats there, but more likely to binge alcohol, to use marijuana, to the tune of 25% versus almost 8. That is an extremely big difference there. Same with vaping or smoking tobacco or vaping nicotine, 17% compared to barely 5, and then opioid misuse as well. All of this to just help us understand there is this connection with our young people, with mental health challenges and substance use. Shifting into thinking about drug use and social media, Columbia University did a study and they found that young people who just have a social media account, we're not saying that they are on there Googling or searching up like how to roll a joint or how to mix a cocktail. They just have a social media account. They found that they were 5 times more likely to buy cigarettes, 3 times more likely to drink alcohol, and 2 times more likely to use marijuana. So just having social media has this really big impact on youth substance use. And connected to that are other studies that have correlated youth saying, hey, yeah, when I see videos and posts of young people who are using substances, it makes me more likely to want to try it. It makes me more likely to think that that's cool or that that's fun or a good experience, and I want to try it. So the exposure is what we're talking about here. They're exposed to more online when it comes to drug use. Not only that, but today's day and age, social media is the source of substances. I would venture, I'm not a gambling girl, but if I were, I would gamble. I would put some money on. You walk up to 10 youth in your community and you ask them, what's the Snapchat account for where I could get some weed here? They'd tell you the Snapchat account. They could name it for you. Because that's the norm these days is that it's typically Snapchat, doesn't have to be, but typically, Snapchat is where these conversations happen, where youth can get access to alcohol, marijuana, and certainly pills, which all of that can come with the risk of them being laced with something like fentanyl that can be very deadly, especially when they're not aware that that's mixed in there. And we keep hearing stories all across the United States of young people overdosing or dying from that. And again, not to reference it too many times here, but in season one of The Pit, they had that exact thing happen where they were at a festival and pills were being shared, and multiple students came in who were overdosing with pills that they got to help them focus. So this is a major issue that our young people are finding their substances online. And then the other thing that we do in prevention work is that we know is an effective strategy is to try to reduce promotions around substances. So an example of this might be reducing the number of, posters that our convenience stores have on the glass facing outside because maybe kids are walking back and forth from school and they're seeing those, and so we try to reduce their exposure to that. Or you walk in to pay and there's a vaping poster advertisement at eye level underneath the counter, eye level of a kiddo. We try to remove those kinds of things in our line of work. When it comes to social media, ads are harder to regulate. Yeah, they're supposed to only go out to certain people of certain ages. But as we already said, 40% of our 8 to 12-year-olds are lying about their age on social media. And some of them, when they created their account, they're just picking 16 or 18 and no one's verifying or checking that. So we've got this issue where they're being exposed to ads that we're not regulating or looking at. So, connection there between drug use and social media. Moving into mental health and social media, I can't tell you. I mean, research over and over and over again points to a connection between social media and increased anxiety, depression, loneliness, hopelessness. And I've got some of that research here for you. And I also have them in my sources at the end if you're interested in doing some of your own research. But compiling that for you today, someone mentioned in the chat that the comparison to others is a huge issue online. And yes, there's this culture of comparison. And you and I, I'm just scanning the people that I can see. I'm going to guess we're above the age of 25, where our prefrontal cortexes are fully developed. We have that tendency to still compare our lives. Like we might see someone post their vacation or their family pictures, and we're like, oh, must be nice. I'm in a fight with my husband, or my kids don't talk to me as often as I want them to. And we have this tendency to have this culture of comparison, and it does impact us. But it also really impacts young people. They see parties that they weren't invited to, or maybe they weren't allowed to go to, and they see those on Snapchat, and they're upset and they're frustrated about that. It hurts their self-esteem and how they feel about themselves. The fear of missing out, that I feel like I'm worried that I might miss something or someone might not invite me to something. And so there's like all of this social pressure that comes with this online space where people are putting their lives out there on display. Oh, do I have a question? Okay. I mentioned the British study about sleep, and that this like delayed, disrupted sleep is connected to depression, memory loss, and poor academic performance. So this, especially with young people, so it affects us as adults too. The sleep is so good for us. Like we need to be sleeping. It's when our bodies repair itself. But especially in this adolescent period, their brains are pruning out information, their bodies are getting restored. So if they're not sleeping well, they're not going to be able to learn as well the next day in school. They're not going to be able to retain that information. And there's also that connection to depression. I likely don't have to say this part, but cyberbullying is happening all across the United States. I mentioned earlier, maybe in our childhood, it was kind of like bullying was reserved for the school playground, but you could walk a certain way home and be safe once you got home. That's not the case for our young people these days. It follows them, the internet follows them. And so that creates quite an issue. There's a show that actually won several awards in this last award season called Adolescence on Netflix. And while I hesitate to fully endorse that, it's a very intense show. It's a short series. It is very fascinating because it essentially tells the story of a young boy who was cyberbullied in a very specific way using emojis that no adult really understood at the time. And it resulted in the death of a peer. And so it's a really interesting and cinematically very well done, hence the awards, take on cyberbullying and the importance of us as adults being mindful of what's being said and posted online. I told you to hold that stat in your mind, that asterisk that I mentioned earlier, and it's because of this reason. The previous administration's Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, he released a study on youth, social media, and mental health. And I have that as a resource for you at the very end. Great, fascinating document. It's only about 30 pages long. It's worth the read. But in his research, he found that young people who spend over 3 hours a day on social media were 2 times more likely to have poor mental health outcomes. So I recall that statistic I shared with you earlier that the average US teen is spending 3.5 hours a day on social media, which puts the vast majority of our young people in this category of being twice as likely to have poor mental health outcomes. So that is very alarming in and of itself. Then we get to the algorithm that somebody in the room was talking about. So the algorithm forces content to us. Like we actually have very limited control of what we see. You certainly can reset your algorithm. You can search for, videos of kittens and sourdough bread and it'll reset your algorithm so that you see the things you want. But this amazing process happens where it is literally tracking when you're in your social media apps, it's literally tracking your eye gaze and it's tracking how long you pause on your screen. So it's using those metrics, what it's tracking there, to find out what you think is interesting. So I use this example when I presented at CADCA that earlier, no, it was like middle of last year. A friend of mine sent me an Instagram reel of these AI babies that were like singing a popular like Elvis song. And the AI baby was like dressed like Elvis and he's singing a song. Super cute. I watched the whole video because it was adorable, right? And then he might have sent me like one or two others of like an AI baby that was like doing a, Talladega Nights scene or something like that. Like just funny movie scenes. Well, all of a sudden, as soon as I opened Instagram, my For You page was all different kinds of AI baby videos of them singing songs or doing movie things. I never liked it. I never put a heart on it. I never commented. It's just because it was sent to me and I watched it. The algorithm was forcing that content to me, just like our person in the room is getting a donkey because the Instagram algorithm said farm animals is the way to go and we got to get you a donkey. The algorithm forces this content to us to see. Now, again, our brains are fully developed, so we are able to decipher information that we want to see and don't want to see. And so when something pops up in my feed consistently that I don't want, I simply go and I move past it very quickly, or I'll click the three dots and say I'm not interested. I've got the wherewithal to do that. Young people may not even understand that what the algorithm is doing, and it might be sending them misinformation. As I have here, they're more likely to experience like violent or hate-based content that's being sent to them. And certainly something that maybe they searched if they're a student athlete and they want to research healthy eating behaviors to be better on the field, it might actually force to them behaviors that are more akin to an eating disorder, but they're not really aware that that's eating disorder like behavior. So there's a big risk here in terms of how the algorithm is forcing content to us. And we're almost just victims to what is sent to us because once you're seeing something, certainly you can move past it quicker, but it's like the clock starts ticking the moment that you start looking at it. And so for that reason too, and I actually sometimes do an extrapolation on this presentation and talk about online exploitation or sextortion because I've done human trafficking prevention work for about 12 years as well. And so that piece there too, when sexualized content is sent to you and you pause and you look at it, it's going to send you more of that kind of content. So definitely alarming. And speaking of Dr. Vivek Murthy, I mentioned him in his study. This is him. And he actually released an op-ed piece before he left office where he said, essentially, just like tobacco has to have a warning label that says it causes cancer, just like with alcohol, we post signs that women should not consume it if they're pregnant. He's like, we need a warning label on social media that it is not proven safe for young people. This, my friends, is a pretty strong remark coming from someone who holds that high of an office. That his research, again, I'm going to share that document with you. His research proved that it is not a safe place for young people to be. So, last comment slide here before we get into solutions is that they've also found that not just, being on social media, having social media creates this mental health issue, but the longer we spend on it creates an even bigger issue. So if I open my phone, check some things, then get off of it, fine. But if I'm on it for 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes straight, the longer I'm on it, the more likely I am to experience the anxiety, the hopelessness, the loneliness, the isolation, just because I'm on it longer. We know that we're impacted by the interactions that are there. I mean, I'm not immune to it. If I have someone who comments on something, it's like, oh, let's go see that. Did they like it? It's just kind of one of those things that we're driven to want to see the impact that we've made in the world. And some of that's with what we post, and especially for young people who are trying to be influencers. That's such a huge push right now, is to try to get followers, and young people are trying to become influencers. They're very impacted by negative feedback, very impacted by, if their videos don't get likes or shares, or someone cyberbullies in the comments, really has an impact on our young people's space there. And then finally, this is something that's interesting, and I don't have time to go into all of it today, but that they're also researching how the filters and the angles that are used with social media apps is actually potentially confusing the teenage brain on reality. That the beautification filters and the things that maybe make us look like we're different in person, that's creating a warped perception of reality. And this goes beyond, the catfishing concept. This is more like just that they're not really that aware. Their definition of what people look like in beauty is changing. So anyway, interesting research to keep tabs on. Okay. So all of this said, we've got to do something at this intersection. We've got to address the problems that are happening there. And I don't want to presume knowledge, but my solutions that I'm going to present to you come from a couple different sources. One is prevention science, and we'll get there in a second. Then these two documents are really key for you if you're looking to continue some education for yourself on this. The second one listed here, the Online Health and Safety for Children and Youth, that is actually a task force from the US government. It was put together by the Biden-Harris administration to address online safety for young people. And that's about a 127-page document, I believe. But a lot of the solutions that I have here come from there. So you're certainly welcome to go and take a look at it. There's some good information in it. And then the third one is the one I've already mentioned from Dr. Vivek Murthy, and then some other research. So just so you know where all of this is coming from, I won't stay here long because it's not the point of the presentation, but I want you to understand that as groups that work on prevention, we can use the same model that we do for substance use prevention to address this dangerous intersection. This is the strategic prevention framework, which is what most communities across the United States and even the world use to address their substance use issues. And it starts with assessment, where we figure out what the problem is, we look at data, we prioritize what's going on, figure out our capacity to address the issues. Do we have the resources we need? Are we ready to tackle this problem? We come up with a plan using some evidence-based strategies and programs and policies. We implement that, we evaluate how that's going. Are we making an impact in our community? And then we kind of start that cycle over again with assessment and go through that, all while trying to be sustainable and culturally competent. So again, you could spend weeks talking about this framework. My point for bringing it up is you can ask these same questions about social media in your community. Let's figure out who's using it. What apps are they using the most? How long are they spending on it? Who's having negative consequences for it? Some student surveys, and I'm not sure about Virginia's statewide survey, but some student surveys are starting to add questions about social media usage. While I live in Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania does have questions about that. And I provide a lot of technical assistance to Missouri still, since I lived there for 12 years. And I was successful in getting them to add to this year's student survey some questions about social media usage and phone usage, because I think it's important to be able to have these like cross tabulation look of youth that are experiencing these problems, because the more we understand the problem, the better we can address it. So assessment is this huge source of being able to figure out what's going on so then we can have solutions. And connected to that, oftentimes our assessment leads us to risk and protective factors, which we call the root causes, meaning like what's actually contributing to the problem. So while research around social media is still evolving and still coming out, what I did was I looked at a list of evidence-based risk and protective factors that we use in substance use prevention, and I draw down some of them that I think are still very relevant to this intersection of social media with substance use and mental health. So risk factor wise, like rebelliousness. So if I happen to be a young person who tends to be more rebellious, meaning I'll challenge the rules, I'll challenge status quo, I might get in trouble a lot, I'm more likely or more at risk to maybe interact on the internet in a very negative way, to be on social media in a negative way. For young people who are in households with family conflict or family management problems, that can put them at higher risk. And you think about if mom and dad are fighting, I might just go escape to my room and be on my phone and scroll there. Even when it comes to parenting, failure to set clear expectations, failure to supervise, inconsistent punishment. Those are the kind of things that can put young people at higher risk. When we do substance use prevention, we always address access and availability. How are they getting the alcohol? How are they getting the vape? And let's try to cut off the source. And so when we think about our phones, I'm actually charging mine in the other room, but I mean, generally speaking, we are around ours all the time. We have access all the time. Our devices are with us. So we are also creating community norms around that, like favorable norms to use, because we as adults are likely with our phones the majority of the time. And then our young people are getting access to that because a lot of young people are getting phones. Now, someone asked me recently when I was doing a presentation, what's the right age for a child to get a phone? And truly, research is there's no conclusive age. It depends on the maturity of the young person. It depends on the parent's ability to monitor that. It depends on whether or not that young person is making healthy choices and good choices for themselves. So there's a lot that goes into that discussion, which takes us into protective factors. What kind of protection does this young person have? So we talked about rebelliousness. But if I happen to be a young person who's very resilient, I can work through challenges. I know that times could get tough, but I'll get through it. That makes me more resilient. I'm probably going to be protective just because I have that intrinsic sort of resiliency in me. I probably will have more protection against that risk. Bonding with parents, with trusted adults, youth pastors, teachers, coaches, bonding with the adults, with the community, that really helps to protect our young people. Included with that is opportunities to get involved, whether that's youth coalition work or in sports, athletics, theaters, recognition for positive behavior. If you do one thing after today, it's like go tell a young person that they're awesome. Like just go tell them that they're awesome. Tell them that you're proud of something that they did. Tell them that they make you smile. Like recognition for positive behavior goes a long way for helping our young people feel like they've got space in this world and that's worth taking up. So that's a pretty key thing there. So I came up with some solutions based on the risk and protective factors we're talking about. I've got some solutions here for you. One, be that trusted adult that they can talk to about their online space. They may be seeing ads. They may be feeling the impacts of FOMO or culture of comparison or, seeing things on Snapchat they don't really want to be seeing. Be the adult that can talk to them about that. And I put in parentheses here, but I should have probably bolded it, like without repercussions. Make this a safe conversation for them to have with you. It's one of those things that this is a discussion that needs to be had. And I think especially as young people get older, they're looking for that autonomy. That's a developmentally normal thing for them to seek. So making this more of an education and a conversation, research shows is the most powerful way for parents, for guardians, for trusted adults to be on the same page. I also have the suggestion here to like use current news stories as starting points for conversation. So, for example, I don't know if you've heard about this, but I think it's about 2 weeks ago now, maybe three. I've kind of lost track of time. But I mean, Mark Zuckerberg was put on the stand in a lawsuit. Mark Zuckerberg, the head of Meta or Facebook and Instagram, was put on the stand and questioned about how social media apps. The lawsuit is all about how social media apps were designed, developed, and have perpetuated child addiction to their apps. And so he was being questioned about that. So when you see news articles like that, use that as a starting point to say, hey, did you know that he's being questioned about how this is addictive? Like and say, I think I have the tendency to be addicted to my phone. What do you think? And use that as a way to start that conversation. Kind of talked about this a little bit at the very start of the day, but encouraging you and me, all of us, to set limits when it comes to our devices. I love that some of you are like, I have my notifications turned off. I don't get push notifications. Love that because it's so much better for our brains to not have that distraction. So you can use timers. Each of the apps, like depending on your phone, I don't know how you get to it in Android, but you can set screen time limits for specific apps. I'm also an advocate of no phone use after 10 p.m. Y'all might remember your parents used to tell you like nothing good happens after 11 p.m. You got to be home by then kind of thing. It's like that except with the internet. Nothing good happens on the internet after 10 p.m. So I just vote for kind of getting phones out of bedrooms, get phones, people like, it's up to you. You run your household or the way you want to. But point just being that I think that setting some kind of limit for ourselves is really important. I told you I'm limiting myself to 15 minutes a day right now. And it's so helpful for me. The first couple days, man, I was maxing out my 15 minutes. It would come up like, all right, you hit your 15. I'm like, oh man, it's only like 2 p.m. Whereas like now I'm like, getting ready for bed and I still haven't hit like 6 minutes. So I have changed behavior over the last couple weeks on purpose. And that is helping me to be like the time that I've gained back is huge. So just some things like that. I mentioned the strain to the eyes. I just very much recommend turning your phone into dark mode. Better for your eye strain. Just a little tip there. Then a couple other things here, asking questions about what's trending, who they've met online, how being online affects their mental health. Have these conversations, ask these questions. We certainly can set examples so that young people see us modeling this behavior. We need to not be cyberbullies online. We need to keep our comments to ourselves, be kind. If you don't have something nice to say, don't type it at all. Just kind of shifting our own behaviors so that we're modeling well, teaching young people refusal skills, teaching them how to identify in themselves when they're being like triggered by something online or when they're starting to feel that icky, like tummy hurts, have a headache. Like it might be time to get off of our phones if we're feeling those things physically. Okay, this next slide has a lot of words on it. I'm not intending for you to read it. This is directly from one of the resources I'm going to give you. So if you are a parent or a caregiver, the document has pages of conversation starters that could be helpful for you. I just put a couple on here that I liked the most. The one that I have actually had a friend use because I told her about it was the bottom one about gaming, because she said that her 13-year-old son would come to the dinner table after just getting off of Fortnite and that he would be mean and rude and like very, very agitated. And so she had that conversation with him. She was like, hey, I want to get on the same page about this. Like, I don't love how you're coming to the dinner table after you play Fortnite. Can we talk about this? And in that conversation, he was like, yeah, honestly, like I don't feel good when I get off of that. Usually my friends frustrate me, they left me hanging or I didn't get what I needed or whatever the issue was. And he's like, I don't like it either. So they set some ground rules for themselves and that helped them to just start that conversation. So the document I'll send to you has lots of really great conversation starters that could be useful, including some of the other resources is an actual family media plan where you can help to establish kind of the rules around your family's approach to media, approach to consuming content online. So that could be useful for you all. And I mentioned this already without repercussions, but to that point too, like making it a low drama conversation. The minute things get kind of hyped or heated, I would just take a break because I can't stress enough how much you want to be on the same page with young people about this. whether you're, again, a parent, a caregiver, or you're part of a youth, organization, a youth serving organization, it's just helpful to have these conversations in a really non-threatening way, punitive way. It's just to make sure that they understand that you're someone they can talk to about this. I also loved the point about non-screen ways to manage emotions and boredom. This was probably, I don't know, maybe a couple months ago. I came across this Instagram account where this girl was trying to train herself to be bored again. And so, I mean, the irony was like, I thought I was giggling about the fact that she like set up her camera and tripod to record herself for an hour straight of her being bored. Like she was sitting on her floor. She had no book. She had no phone. She had nothing. And so the video was, fast forwarded over time. But it was just like her like moving around and she's like laying up against the wall and then she's just moving. So she's trying to teach her brain how to be bored again. And I was really fascinated with that idea because I thought, man, yeah, when I was a kid, we got creative when we were bored, and so and now today, if I've got a free moment, I'm picking up my phone and I'm scrolling. So that even challenged me to think about when I'm bored or when I don't have something exactly, some task I'm actively working on, what am I doing? Am I on my phone or am I doing something different? Okay, so I'm gonna land the plane in a second and take questions, but these are some of the recommendations that have been issued for the industry specifically. Things like banning ads to 16-year-olds, anyone under the age of 16, seems like that should happen anyway. Not even ads around substance use or whatever. This could just be ads. Like they don't need to have the new Nike shoes sent to them as a promotion. Like that. Y'all are like, please stop sending them the Nike shoes. That like that sort of targeted ad being removed. Certainly keeping 13-year-olds off the platform. Or those under 13, I should say. But there is discussion around the United States raising that minimum age to 16, which I know several of you in the room thought that it was 16. So there is some discussion about moving it there. Now, interestingly enough, I'm skipping ahead slides, but Australia in December, just 2 months ago, 3 months ago, they actually passed, they're a very first country to pass a law that bans anyone under the age of 16 from being on social media as a whole. So that's huge. And I know that several other countries are looking to follow suit. Like I think Britain was on there, Germany was on there, Greece was on there. Like several of them are trying to follow suit like that. And again, because of the work that I do around sextortion and online exploitation, man, y'all, I can't tell you how necessary that is. I couldn't get into that today, but it is a scary world out there when it comes to the online grooming that goes on with our young people. Certainly, there needs to be transparency around that dang algorithm and what it's forcing to us, but specifically what it's forcing to young people, specifically like the things that it's collecting about your young people. Like parents should have a say in what kind of information these apps are collecting about young people. I didn't talk about AI at all, but man, could I. I've done some research around AI, and I just say this, like, we've got to have ethics around AI. There is just so much out there that is fake news, and people are not aware of that it is AI. Another suggestion is banning individuals who are younger than 18, so minors, from having a public account. Now, I have a friend whose daughter makes a couple thousand off of YouTube every month doing like get readies with me and things like that. She's got like 350 subscribers, 350,000 subscribers. She would definitely have a hit to her income if they made her account go to private. But again, for the protection of our young people. And then I won't talk about all of this, but the last one on here is the one that I want to suggest you all advocate for in your communities, in your school districts. Advocate for required media literacy training, curriculum that the school does that teaches young people how to be safe online, how to identify some of the things that I've talked through today. If we can start requiring that, just like they're required to learn about the Civil War, they're required to learn about math, we need to teach them. This is a relevant thing that we're going to face for the rest of our lives. So let's teach them how to be safer online. So that's a huge takeaway for you all to potentially start looking into that. And then just to end on a couple good notes here, August of 2024, Senator Josh Hawley out of Missouri passed a bipartisan bill that did start to, as it says there, impose a duty of care on our social media companies about content that's harmful to minors. So it gives, the next slide has a lot more details on it, but you can look that up. The Kids Online Safety Act that did pass helps parents have more controls. So the things that you're seeing now, if you're aware of them, like Instagram, for example, has a whole new teen account a lot of that is coming from this kind of legislation. So the needle's moving, just maybe at a slow pace. Minnesota was the first state to require exactly what Dr. Vivek Murthy suggested. They're requiring a label, warning label, to be put on social media so that when it's opened, it warns you that it could pose a hazard to your health. New York is apparently looking to pass something similar very soon. Now, my thoughts on this at first are like, yay. And then my thoughts are, okay, but like at what point does that become white noise? Like I'm just going to kind of be annoyed at it if I have to click it every time I get in the app. So there's kind of a like it's I think that we can have stronger laws, but I am proud of because again, one of the things is we're raising awareness. So if states start passing laws like this, at least people's awareness gets raised that it is harmful. And then this is the Australia thing that I already mentioned. So to close us out and leave some time for questions, my solution is connection and protection. Like our job is to connect with our young people. We'll be able to protect them better. These are some of the resources. So if you're on, well, I guess no matter what, you've probably got a phone or device near you. You can scan that QR code. It will take you to a website with a whole host of resources for you. The blue document on the left, if you want to search for that, you would just search the title there, or just look for like online health and safety task force, and that will pop up this document. You'll be able to find it there. And then the one on the right is that Dr. Vivek Murthy one that I mentioned. So as you can see visually what those documents look like, the PDFs, helpful. And then another page of resources I've got for you, various places to find curriculum, to find parent talking guides, to find policies around social media. And then if yeah, I can always get you all more if you need anything specific, but a lot of these have a really great way to get that information. Okay. So I've got some time to take some questions. I've also got my email there if anybody wants to get in touch and has any needs.